whom I raised my own family, united around each other with determination in the face of despair. To see the emotional depth of these experiences reflected in this book fills me with hope, that others may understand where we come from, that they may feel the loss of seeing a place erased from the world, even as they still have time to avoid it for themselves and others. I hope that as you read these short stories, essays, and poems, these truthful and honest accounts of the emotional confrontation between the unstoppable force of disasters and the immovable object of human perseverance, you are steeled in your resolve to act. When I became Executive Secretary of UN Climate Change, I made it my mission to keep humanity at the core of our work. Became Executive Secretary of UN Climate Change, I made it my mission to keep humanity at the core of our work. Even at the highest levels, as we worked on negotiations where parties combed over every sentence,
The last session here in the old fire station. Some of you have been here all day. Is energy holding up? Yeah. Everybody good? Okay. Wow, okay. It's either everyone has been having lots of caffeine and lots of sweet treats, so lots of glucose and lots of caffeine, or else it's all the ideas and intellectual and creative energy that's fueling you all up, right? So in a day that has been full of all kinds of riches, all kinds of books, writing, writers, conversation, I'm not supposed to have favorites, but this event this afternoon is one that's very special to us for a couple of reasons. Number one is that the Cropper Foundation have been friends, allies, partners of the Peekash Lit Fest for many, many years, and this is not the first time we've collaborated with them. So it's a delight for us to have the Cropper Foundation back at the festival, not just launching this important new anthology, Writing for Our Lives, but some of you may know the Peekash Lit Fest has a book imprint, Peekash Press, and Writing for Our Lives is actually the latest publication of Peekash Press. So we're not just giving them a forum to launch the book, it's a book that we've published in collaboration, so we're thrilled about that. Another reason this is a very special event is that the Cropper Foundation, as again some of you may know, is best known for its work in the field of the environment, climate justice, and so on. But from the very beginning, the foundation has also had a literary element. One of their very first programs, best known programs and most successful programs, is their writing workshop, their residential writing workshop that ran for many, many years and is on pause, but we thoroughly believe and expect it is going to return soon. I'm not going to say too much more. I'm supposed to be very brief, but I just want to say that I'm particularly happy of all the anthology writers who are here this afternoon. The Cropper team, particularly happy that we have Merle Hodge with us, and please welcome her. That residential writers workshop that the Cropper Foundation ran for so many years, Merle was one of the co-facilitators. Of course, the other co-facilitator was Funsho Ayejina, a name we have mentioned many times at the festival this year. Funsho, of course, was a great friend of not just Cropper, but the Peekash Lit Fest. He's not here with us this year, but he's certainly here with us in the spirit of this book. Funsho was originally meant to be one of the editors of this book. He'd actually started working on it when he died. The last brief conversation I had with him was actually about this book specifically. He was very ably replaced, and so there's something of, I think, of his intellectual DNA in the formation of the book, even though it ended up being edited by two other quite different and extremely, in their own rights, impressive and assiduous editors. But in a very real way, this book, in addition to everything else it does, the work it does to spread the message about climate justice, to amplify voices, all of that, it is also in a very real way a memorial to Funsho, and it is in fact dedicated to him. So I'm going to hand you over now to the CEO of the Cropper Foundation. Please welcome her up on stage, Cherise Brathwaite. Let me come back.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. It sounds like we have energy, so that's good. So I'd like to say good afternoon, everyone, to everyone gathered here at the Old Fire Station, as well as those who are joining us virtually online with the live stream. It is my absolute pleasure, my joy, and my honor to really welcome you to this launch of Writing for Our Lives, the Caribbean Climate Justice Anthology. Before we get started, I would really like to start with the acknowledgements of gratitude, of which we have many. On behalf of the Cropper Foundation, I would like to thank our host, the Peekash Lit Fest, our publishing partner, Peekash Press, Open Society Foundations, our funding partner, for this initiative as part of the wider Today Congote project. That support has been vital. Our editors, Diana McCaulay and Shivanee Ramlochan, for your vision and your dedication in bringing this project into fruition. Our project coordinator, who herself is a Cropperite, Niala Bhagwan Singh, for her monumental support in liaising with the writers and the editorial team. Our 18 writers, whose stories, poems, and essays make up the anthology. And I would also like to thank the other contributors to the anthology, Ms. Merle Hodge, for your dedication to the beloved Funsho Ayejina, who we are happy and honored to have with us today. Simon Steele, for his compelling foreword in the anthology, is representing as a Caribbean man at the helm as the Executive Secretary of the UN Framework for the Convention of Climate Change, Omar Mohammed, TCF Director, for his afterword, and as the originator of the Today Congote project, and all of you who are present here today, in person and online. So thank you once again, and I give you a round of applause. Right. So being here today to launch this much anticipated anthology feels like a homecoming for us at the Cropper Foundation. There's something very special about being part of this milestone 15th anniversary of the Bocas List Fest in the milestone 25th year of the Cropper Foundation. So we go way back, Cropper and Bocas, we have a relationship. And to a significant degree, that relationship was forged by the passion and generosity of the late Funsho Ayogina, who we shared. His 20-year tenure as lead coordinator for Cropper's residential workshop for emerging Caribbean writers overlapped with his 10 years in the role of deputy director of the Bocas Lit Fest. It's no surprise that his absence resonates on a day like today. I'm told that when the idea for the anthology was first born, he was the first person that was consulted on it and was the obvious choice for its editor. And knowing that Funso had stepped back from many of his roles, he was literally sought out at his Kumana sanctuary to plead the case, but thankfully he did not need convincing at all. So today, we pay tribute to Funso, friend, ally, co-conspirator, and a literary giant, whose legacy runs deep through the pages of this book, and to therefore we have dedicated the book. I'd like to see some applause. So as I mentioned previously, Writing for Our Lives is part of our broader Today Congote initiative, which is a project that places arts at the heart of climate justice movement. It's worth explaining that Today Congote is an adaptation of the expression one day Congote, which loosely translates to one day you go see, or something that my daughter is very used to hearing me say, those who can't hear will feel. Today registers the presence and urgency of the existential threat that is climate change, not that it's a threat that is to come. And we also must recognize our Cropper associate Marcus Waldron for coming up with this brilliant title. So, Today Congote is about centering the voices of Caribbean people, especially those who are most vulnerable on the margins, who are bearing the brunt of a global crisis they did not create, and facing the consequence of decisions that did not consider them, or do not consider them. It was just shy of a year ago that we opened the call for submissions for Caribbean writers resident in the region. This was intentional, and we are proud to share that over those 5 weeks, we received 130 submissions from 19 countries, including Colombia. In the end, after a rigorous, sometimes challenging editorial process, we landed on the final 18 writers from 8 countries across the region: Barbados, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Martin, the Bahamas, and Trinidad and Tobago. You have lent your voices to this collection of essays, stories, and poems, and together, we've charted a literary map of reckoning and resilience. These stories are not abstract tales of melting ice caps or distant disaster events. These are rooted, grounded narratives, stories of families, stories of cultures and communities witnessing and living the impacts of climate change in real time. These stories take us beyond the nameless, faceless, lifeless, and quite frankly, loveless statistics of shared disaster. And as art is wont to do, they leave us with more questions and leave us with an invitation to reflect. In lieu of having all our writers here in person, I would like to ask for your help with some applause as I recognize each of them in alphabetical order. If you are present here today, which I know many of you are, I would ask you to please stand when you hear your name. And for those online, maybe drop a fire emoji or a thumbs up or something so that we know you're here. So Randy Ablack. Brendon Alekseii. Tajio Bovert. Sorry, online. Right. Anika Christopher. Fire emoji. Sonia Farmer, Dreylan Johnson, Elton Johnson, Kevin Jared Hosein, Reese Ethan Knowles, Simone Leid, Amanda McIntyre, Judy Raymond, Christina Katrina Smith, Portia Subran, Sharma Taylor, Charlie Thomas, Scott Tingaki, and Nadine Tomlinson. So ladies and gentlemen, one final round of applause for all the 18 writers presented. So before we move on to the rest of today's program, which I know is the real reason you're here, you didn't come to hear me speak, I would like to share two important highlights of this initiative. When Cropper Foundation set out on the journey to realize writing for our lives, we always imagined in some way it would reinforce the importance of building the Caribbean writing community as an ode to the Foundation's beginnings in the residential workshop. We're immensely grateful to Simone Dalton of Island Scribe and Niala Bagwansing of Write Club TT, who came together to create a virtual writing community for the 20+ writers whose submissions were originally selected for the anthology. In 6 sessions over 3 weeks, the writers explored themes such as the revision process, self-case and social justice writing, legacy, and building a writing community. Many of you may not have been aware, but as we were just told, the creation of TCF's Writer Development Program was indeed the first initiative of our founders, John and Angela Cropper, even before Cropper Foundation was registered. Therefore, while our core work has been visible in the breadth and complexity of sustainable development, the literary exploration and development of Caribbean identity and community has always given us a sense of home. The other came to us near the culmination of the anthology and became a spin-off project of Writing for Our Lives. This is an art collaboration conceived by Nicholas Laughlin as a discrete platform to present the work of some of the writers who were among those originally selected for the anthology. Their writing would be paired with existing work from visual artists that convey and amplify the essence and sentiment of the text. Adapted from a line of a poem of Kittian writer Roll J. Williams, this project is titled Displaced Never Again. The final product takes the form of an interactive poster thoughtfully designed to engage the viewer through a selection of resonating images and words. At this point, we recognize the writers and artists who we trusted to bring this to life. So from the writers' side, we have Ezekiel Allen from Guyana, Kathy Badenoch, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Lucy Hammonds of Barbados, Dana Sudu Singh of Trinidad and Tobago, and Roll J. Williams, St. Kitts and Nevis. And the visual artistic side, Maya Cross Lovelace, Nadia Huggins, Michelle Isava, Shane Hansen Mohammed, and Elichi Todd. So let's put our hands together for all of them. And finally, to the woman who brought it all to life on our behalf, artist and curator Naima Muwakil. We are so happy to announce that these posters have been made available for free download, or will be very soon, via the Cropper Foundation's website within the next week. So you can look out for the announcement on all our social media channels, which I hope you're all following. And we are delighted to have them on display today, right outside in front of the old fire station. So we ask you to please take some time, please view them, take time to scan the code, and really interact with the installation. So, as you can tell, this is so much more than a book launch. This is a call for the recognition of the integral place of arts in the climate movement, specifically in the Caribbean region. At the Cropper Foundation, we believe that development must be holistic and it must be humane. It must integrate storytelling with the science, the activism, and the art. We believe in the potential and the power of art to move hearts, challenge minds, and shift policy decisions. With Writing for Our Lives and the rest of the Today Congote project, we really hope to take that work further, connecting the artists, connecting educators, policymakers, activists, and connecting communities across all the intersections in our shared pursuit for justice and sustainability. So, I have kept you long enough, but I will end by encouraging you to purchase as many print copies as possible of the book. These proceeds cover a second print that will allow us to get these books into the libraries, into NGOs, institutions across the region. please help us to pay it forward. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for taking time to join us, and do enjoy the rest of the program. At this time, I would like to invite Ms. Milhodge to read her dedication to Funso Ayagina. Thank you very much.
Right. Good afternoon, all, and all formalities observed. Well, imaginary, in an imaginary way, right? I just want to also say, Stay Up, Bocas, Stay Up, Cropper, two very important organizations. And of course, the young writers there, all very important to our overall development as a country ourselves, and the Caribbean as well, of course, right? So stay up. Now, Funso left us quietly. He left us in the same quiet way that he went about his work as a writer, teacher, and mentor of budding writers. But his legacy will never leave us. His poetry, his prose fiction, his plays, and also the articles and essays that he wrote that were to do with literary criticism that help us to appreciate good literature, right? And then, of course, the part he played in the development of new writers. For years, Funso worked with the Bocas Lit Fest, the Cropper Foundation, and the Literatures in English program at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. Before he retired from UE, he developed and added to the offerings of the university, of our university, a long wished for program at the postgraduate level. This is the Master of Fine Arts, the MFA, in creative writing. I worked with Funso over a period of 20 years in the Cropper Foundation's writing workshop. The foundation took group after group of up-and-coming writers to a venue, usually by the sea, perhaps every single time, by the sea, far away from noise and distraction. Grand Riviere, Toco, Gaspery Island, Tobago, or Balandra. There we would camp, quote unquote, for 3 weeks, usually in August, to work with participants on their writing skills. It was always an unforgettable experience. The workshop was designed and led by Funso, with me as co-facilitator. But I learned so much from him that I consider myself to have been also a student participant. Outside of classes and continuing after his retirement, Funso selflessly honored requests from individual writers to read their work and give them feedback. This was even extended to writers at the residential workshops, after the workshop was over, despite the half-jocular warnings he gave about not wanting to see or hear from any of them after we all went back home. He would say that almost every day. But he, they sent work to him and he dealt with it. A young man phoned me as soon as he heard the news of Funso's passing and told me that Funso had just recently read his manuscript, approved it, and given him some valuable advice. Of course, Funso's experienced eye would pick up early in the reading of a manuscript, whether it was necessary to read to the end before he could make an assessment. And he was not one to mamagai an aspiring writer out of misguided kindness. If he found your writing to be substandard, he would give it back to you with specific comments, and he might tell you to go and read this book or that. In 2020 or thereabouts, when I had finished my latest manuscript, I asked him whether he had had the time, I hadn't given it to him yet, whether he had the time to give it a look over. I told him it was a rather fat manuscript that would take up a lot of his time, and so I wanted to pay him a consultant's fee. Well, who tell me to say that? Funcho's response to my suggestion was, if you were not just a little bit older than me, I would have cussed you, right? With all his outstanding work, however, Funcho remained self-effacing and low profile. The sterling contribution he has made will continue to benefit current and future generations of writers. Thank you.
Let's give Ms. Milhodge another round of applause. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. Okay, at this time, I would like to draw your attention to your screens as we have a special video message from Simon Steele, who is the Executive Secretary of the UN Framework for the Convention on Climate Change, and he also penned our foreword in the anthology, which you will hear an excerpt from in this video. Thank you.
When I became Executive Secretary of UN Climate Change, I made it my mission to keep humanity at the core of our work. Even at the highest levels, as we worked on negotiations where parties combed over every sentence, every word, every comma of text, agreeing the commitments of all countries around the world, I strove to keep front of mind the human face of climate change. Today, Congote takes on this mission with the appearance of ease that can only be born out of great beauty and artistry. Through fictional stories, poignant poems, and harrowing accounts of real experiences from authors all across the Caribbean, the reader gets acquainted with the lived experience of those on the front lines of climate change. Not just the factual loss and powerlessness experienced by those in the midst of disaster, but the fear, anxiety, and hope that came before, and the despair, determination, and willpower that followed the trauma of seeing your home gone and meeting a new world, a poorer world, in its stead. Indeed, climate reckoning is not something that will one day come. In an uncertain future, we hope may not truly come to pass. It is here, not one day, today, Congote. I myself was acquainted with this experience last year, from the foreboding nature of so many climate news. We are not on track, and we need to accelerate, to the experience of seeing the island I call home, Karaku, devastated by Hurricane Beryl. In its wake, I saw a community that helped shape the man I am today, and amongst whom I raised my own family, united around each other with determination in the face of despair. To see the emotional depth of these experiences reflected in this book fills me with hope. That others may understand where we come from, that they may feel the loss of seeing a place erased from the world, even as they still have time to avoid it for themselves and for so many others. I hope that as you read these short stories, essays, poems, these truthful, honest accounts of the emotional confrontation between the unstoppable force of disasters and the immovable object of human perseverance, you are steeled in your resolve to act in every way you can. Making your own voice heard at home, in civil society, making it clear to your representatives that fighting climate change and supporting every community to adapt, leaving nobody behind, is not just a priority, it is the priority.
Are you hearing me? Okay, great, perfect. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ardeen Serju, and I am a member of the Cropper Foundation team, and I've had the pleasure of working on this project very closely with our editorial team here, our very esteemed editorial team, and Nyala Bagwan Singh as project coordinator. So we don't have too much time because I know that this event is meant to end at 3:30, but we did beg for some extra time. Sorry, at 4:30. So we did beg for some extra time though. So bear with us. We will have a discussion among us with the editorial team. And during the course of that discussion, we'll be inviting readers up to share from their pieces. All right, so I'll start with, of course, Diana McCaulay and Shivanee Ramlochan, who don't need much of an introduction to this crowd. But you both joined this project at very different junctures and under very different circumstances. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about why you were moved. And Shivanee, we'll start with you because you were on board the project from the outset. Funsho did nominate you as his co-editor in the initial iteration of this project. So tell us what moved you to come on board.
The chance to work with Funsho in this capacity, it felt like a dream in the best possible way. I was an attendee of the 2010 Cropper Foundation Residential Writers Workshop, and it felt beautifully full circle in the most humbling kind of circumstances to be able to do this work, that Funsho wanted to do this work with me, and that was the spirit into which I entered enthusiastically. Like Nicholas mentioned, my last conversation with Funsho, which was very brief, was also about the anthology.
Diana?
So I got asked to do this after Funsho passed, and I'd actually sent in a story, right? So I had to decide whether I was going to take on work with Shivanee, take on the role of editor, and withdraw my story, which I did very happily. I was very honored to do this. It's something I have wanted to do for a while. I am a writer, yes, but I have another life. Maybe some of you know this as an environmental activist. And I read a lot about the environment, but very rarely about Caribbean voices. And so it was, for me, a really exciting request. I'm sorry for the circumstances in which it was made, but I was very glad to participate.
It was not an easy decision for us to have to reconcile with leaving your story out, I have to say, very biasly. All right, so Elton Johnson is our first reader this afternoon. Elton's piece is a fiction piece. It's titled Coconut Water. He's from Jamaica, I should add.
Dana had not come prepared for a crowd. She was still in her funeral dress, and her hair was still up in a very tight bun. She had expected to maybe find 3 or 4 people at most in the wide open space that used to be Prospect Beach. Not this organized chaos of people in their finest beach clothing with reggae music playing on loudspeakers. A lot of people there today, Jono said. His obvious discomfort made Dana acutely more aware that they were different from the others. Yeah, Dana said. If me did know, I would carry beach clothes because we left so sudden. Jono had already removed his blazer and tie in the car, and now had on his white shirt and gray pants. He pulled his shirt out of his pants and unbuttoned it to expose his sleeveless undershirt. He carried his shoes in his hand. Following suit, Dana loosened her bun and allowed her hair to fall on her shoulders, then took off her black flats and held them. As they got to the front, Dana saw a woman sitting on a high stool in a small booth that was walled by glass. The woman reeled off prices in various foreign currencies. Jono handed her over money in Jamaican equivalent, and they entered Prospect Park Beach Club for the first time. There used to be trees everywhere, sea grapes and coconuts, and grass covering more than 50% of the shoreline. Garbage was often mixed with seaweed and scattered all over. Now there was no garbage in sight. The sand felt loose, foreign, not densely packed, and whiter than Dana had remembered it. It had been raked to perfection, not even an odd piece of coconut frond anywhere. At the back of the beach where the sea grapes had been, shops selling souvenirs, trinkets, and snacks took over. There were still a handful of coconut trees, but maybe half the original number. In the sea itself were luxurious cabanas covered in canopies of white linen and sporting comfy-looking hammocks. However, despite all the grandiosity that made the space seem more posh, the beach itself, the space where sand met sea, was very small, disappearing, barely still there. Confused by all the newness around her, Dana struggled to find where to sit. "What you looking for?" Jono asked. Grandma used to have a special spot, but I can't remember where it is. You remember what it looked like? It used to have a sturdy coconut tree next to it. Jono laughed. The beach still had a number of coconut trees. Ignoring him, Dana probed her mind to remember the exact spot, but instead became lost in a vivid memory of their last trip to Prospect Beach some years ago.
Thank you very much, Elton. And of course, that's just an excerpt of Elton's short story in the anthology. Shivanee and Diana, back to you. So it would be interesting, I think, especially from where I sit, to know what your process was like for coming up with a vision. After you received our mandate of what, we wanted all of these fiction, non-fiction, poetry, we wanted it to be as balanced as possible. How did you weigh up all the considerations? We're talking gender, genre, Caribbean representation. How did you approach that task? Diana, maybe we start with you.
So this is why women should be in charge of the world, okay? So we very quickly decided how we were going to approach it for the first go-around, which is simply really a simple thing of sharing up the stories, right? And so each of us would have a first impression of them, and after that we would swap and then come up with let us call it a long list, the contenders for the to be included. I will say for me, I'm not sure how Shivanee feels about this. I don't think about things like geographical spread, gender, topic until much later down in the process, because I am really just in the beginning engaging with the work. And I'm trying to decide whether, it has made me feel something. I think there's maybe a kernel here I'm not quite developed perhaps, before I really get to the point where we're thinking about what the whole collection is going to look like. So I'll stop there and say that's the beginning, and let Shivanee continue.
And in a way, I'll add to what Diana said by offering that it was a gift to have both the Cropper Foundation and Peekash Press at the helm of, let's call them, demographical considerations. It meant that Diana and I could really properly focus on the quality inherent in each piece, the things we felt were resonating most strongly, areas we felt that could stand for improvement, not for the sake of some blanket sense of making a thing better, but how we could make each piece, so each poem, each nonfiction piece, and each work of fiction better represent the things it was trying to convey itself, so not to impose our ideas of what it should be, but how could the piece best serve the message it was trying to convey.
Thank you. So Kevin, I'll ask you to come up. We have Kevin Jared Hosein with his excerpt of the script. Also in the fiction category.
Just a short note about my story before I start reading. The story is based in a Trinidad that has been sold to a much larger country, Trinidad and other tropical countries, to be used as farmland. And it's narrated, as strange as it might sound, and I guess you have to picture it, by a 3-foot-tall robot that is designed like Papa Boa. Not 3 foot, 3 meters, sorry. Tall. 4 months ago, the district of Rio Lumbre had its electrical grid and water supply cut. Yet, the people remain. They aren't intimidated by Antia's headquarters. They aren't intimidated by the treaty. And they aren't intimidated by me. Do you not tire of living in darkness? I ask Hira. Mush! He balls his fists up. He is the only one unarmed amongst the villagers. We want none of what you're offering, mush! I address the residents holed up in the houses behind them. Kindly understand that this is for the benefit of humanity. But who humanity? A voice from a bed-sheeted window. I shake my head. It is for all humanity in the long term. Perhaps this has not been made clear to you. It clear to me? A young man says, Jerome Bryce, 22, unmarried, no children. He lowers his cricket bat. It clear to you? Usually headquarters wouldn't bother with a single party unwilling to cooperate with the move. Electricity and water cuts quickly bleed their resolve. When the soil was tested in Rio Lumbre, it showed a remarkable composition of pyroxenes and sanidine, which are important magnesium and potassium reservoirs. A pH of 6.3, making it ideal for growing sorghum and other crops. The other communities initially agreed to move, but when Hira first shot his fist up and the rest of Rio Lumbre rallied behind him, the surrounding villagers decided to follow suit, unfortunately. I know where the critical mass lies. I would prefer to do things by the book during this incredibly volatile transition. No casualties, no bloodshed, no opportunities for riots. Please put your weapons down, I tell the men. We must rely on diplomacy. A woman emerges from a house with a baby in her arms, an imperial red bandana over her head. She says, when you leave, then we will put them down. Lucy St. Croix, Nate Jackson, age 33, homemaker. Husband is Maxwell St. Croix, paramedic. They have one child, Raymond St. Croix, 5 months old. I cannot leave until you abide by the treaty your government signed, I told them. Treaty my ass. I say, you would prefer Raymond grow up in this darkness. You would make the decision to deprive him. Her raised eyebrows indicate a surprise that I know her child's name. I assure you that this move, as daunting as it is for your security as well. Bucket of bolts, we ain't moving. Hira jumps in. What else we have to say to you? Now mush, what you gonna do? Kill we? Kill all of we? Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And we look forward to creating the opportunity to engage our writers directly about their pieces and sharing that with you at some point in the future. But for now, we return to our conversation with our editors. When we conceived of this anthology, as you know, we had this idea about what creative nonfiction would look like and the kind of outlet it would provide for those who wanted to submit essays. You know, because of the topic, the thematic focus, we imagined that we'd have more submissions, and we did have quite a few submissions along those lines. But we learned very quickly that it wouldn't be that simple in the context of a literary anthology. And so in the end, we have three nonfiction pieces in the anthology. Can you all share with us a little bit your thoughts on how we manage, and maybe as from an NGO perspective, what are some of the considerations we should make in future when we come up with these exciting projects with our own visions for what it's going to look like in the end? Maybe share with us what are the challenges in writing for specific themes of this nature for a literary anthology?
I think writing an essay is one thing, but creative nonfiction is a specific type of essay, and that requires the use of some of the devices of fiction, things like simile, metaphor. And so it has a much less rigid format than, let us say, just an account of something that happened. And I think perhaps the term is not really fully understood by some of the pieces that were submitted by the writers of those pieces. So, but I after 30-something years of environmental activism, I came to be sure that it was not a question of standing up and regurgitating facts. Fine, know your facts, right? But it was a question of reaching for people's hearts. And that is what I think creative nonfiction allows you to do. It allows you to merge some facts. A thing happened, you went to a thing, this was what took place, with that reaching for hearts. And I think that was something that we would have liked to see more of. You asked a question about how to reach for that, and I'm not sure how to reach for that, because if it's an open call for pieces, you have to allow for people's creativity, Maybe some courses in creative nonfiction, I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, book us.
No pressure.
Just very quickly, Shivanee, just for the folks who don't know Diana, apart from being a prize-winning author, she's also the founder of the Jamaica Environment Trust. So she definitely brings the two worlds together. Shivanee.
No pressure about the workshops. And to add to what Diana said, we saw a great deal of potential in the creative nonfiction that we considered, and we had quite a few discussions about where the potential was, and ultimately many of the pieces that we did not select shouldn't be thought of as an indication of poor quality. They were just not writing creative nonfiction. They were writing stories they believed in, things they had experienced personally. And so it's quite difficult for me as an editor to often sit with the truth of someone's very lived experience and make an editorial decision that might seem to be punitive, but really, as I said up top, it is about serving the best and most potent, most visceral, most intentional truths that each piece can tell. And so I do think this idea of workshops, not to give the Peekash Lit Fest more work, though it's work we gladly embrace, about what CNF is, what it can do, what it's meant to do, and how each individual writer can come to that, will help for Writing for Our Lives Part 2.
And we certainly have great examples of it in the region. So I think we can point folks to some of those. And speaking of creative nonfiction, we do have coming up next Dreylan Johnson from Guyana. With her piece, The Ghosts Are Trapped Indoors With Us. Dreylan's piece is actually the postscript for the anthology. Let's welcome her.
By the time we proceeded on our rescue mission, the rising waters had already consumed the roadways and made a river of Homestretch Avenue. Navigating was all best guess and muscle memory, and as our trusty Toyota Corona crawled along the asphalt, tires barely gripping, the water began to seep through the spaces in the door frames. We made it to my aunt's house, eventually. This aunt bore the formal title of cousin, though the familial connection was at best sketchy in my then 12-year-old mind. All I'd known of her until then was the warmth of her delicious patties, which we would occasionally pick up from her home, a bottom flat that doubled as a catering business. That day, the furniture had been rearranged to prevent as much destruction as possible. A distinct smell lingered in the air, a stench I began to associate with that of water trapped under a vinolé floor. For the duration of the disaster, our own home would remain flood-proof. Though threatening, the water never made it past the second of 3 stairs. Perhaps it was a luck of the draw, or maybe it had something to do with our unique positioning in the neighborhood system, the fact that our neighbors to the north and west were unoccupied lots with overgrown vegetation, roots deep and ready for the taking. I grew accustomed to the floods, much like I'd grown accustomed to the killings. For 4 years, from 2002 to 2006, gruesome images had plastered the front pages of the daily newspapers, shaping my prepubescent psyche. The 2005 flood would become the new benchmark and a steady point of reference whenever disaster struck. The city would never flood again that badly, but whether this was in fulfillment of a promise was yet to be seen. However, any extensive rainfall overnight was guaranteed to turn the Garden City into a lake of filth. This often meant canceled school days and slower work days. For newspapers specifically, it was a guaranteed front page image. Just over a decade later, my job would take me into the fields to provide coverage of flood events. La Niña would make her steady mark, pummeling communities that later required flood relief. March 2018, my assignment took me out of the city, over the river, to the west coast of Demerara. I made my way through a crowd of onlookers to the seawall where I marveled with them as 25-foot waves towered above the walls and crashed at our feet. Mother Nature was making a mockery of our sea defense system, and homes in the surrounding communities were under threat. In the months that followed, we would read reports of flooding across the country due to excess rainfall. This was the new normal. By then, we were used to extreme weather events, but nothing prepared us for the heat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dreylan. Dreylan is one of 3 journalists in the anthology. We have Christina Katrina Smith from Barbados, who lives in St. Vincent, and also Judy Raymond. But she's the only one who's actually written creative nonfiction. So that was interesting as well. Shivanee, I'll invite you now as the co-editor who penned the editorial statement to share an excerpt of that. I admit I chose it. She didn't get to choose.
I trust Ardeen, so. My formidable co-editor, Diana McCaulay, and I, in our numerous and intricate conversations about the strengths of these contributions, spoke often of the resonances they would leave in the actual world. Who would their corresponding readers be? And how would the anthology writers speak to the communities they write about with such focus? The answers, we found, were embedded in the work itself, from cocoa plantations poorly interpreted as exotic in foreign investors' eyes, to tight-knit villages turned suspicious through severe drought. The people in these stories, poems, and non-fiction pieces live real lives. They balance actual, identifiable hopes against a swarm of equally concrete threats to their happiness and safety. Threats of hurricanes and landslides, floods and storms, insincere global leaders, and shoddy policymaking designed to let down the smallest of island states. Yet within these small islands, vast voices reside, ready to speak into the injustice of the impending devastations we have, with punitive unfairness, inherited.
Thank you very much, Shivanee. And that may be one of the few editorial notes people may read. I don't know that it's a very popular part of the book generally. So thank you, thank you so much for that. I was intrigued by the idea of these discussions that you all would have. In fact, I always wanted to ask what those, I wish I could be a fly on the wall to hear what those discussions were like, but I am interested in knowing what those discussions would reveal and unearth for you all and the vision for the anthology as it unfolded.
You go first this time, man.
I think it was crucial that Diana and I were very honest with each other. I respect Diana immensely as an editor, and I think we realized quite early on that in several respects we're very different in our editorial practices. But the thing I think that united us quite fiercely was our sense of integrity and care for the work. Without that, it would have been a really different prospect. We might have been fighting still, all now. But
there was fighting?
No.
Oh.
There wasn't any fighting.
But for me, I can reveal that also, it wasn't that his voice ever superseded Diana's, but Funsho was with me as I did this work, and I thought of his really enviable and amazing capacity to diffuse tension in this extraordinary non-mamaguying way. If you don't know what mamaguying is, ask a Trini friend after and they'll tell you. And Funsho excelled at that. Whenever there were points of, and invariably, to be honest, there will be points of tension in any co-editorial project. But again, the honesty was supreme throughout. And I thought, how would Funsho deal with this situation? How would he approach this conversation? And I lent on him in ways I knew I would, and also more than I expected.
So for me, it wasn't my first experience with being a juror, or if we want to call that a juried process, or being a judge of a prize. So I had done this before, and I want to say that I have learned that good people that you absolutely respect their talent, their integrity, their knowledge, can disagree on stories. And so I start there, right? I expect a co-editor and I not to see every piece the same way. And that was true. We did not see every piece the same way. I learned a lot from Shivanee. At the end of the process, I was very happy that we did come at it from different standpoints. You know, she has a very strong poetic, lyrical background, which I don't have. And I come from the standpoint where you gotta get the science right. You know, the marine environment you're describing has to be correct. So in a way, we were, I think, very complementary. And the last thing I'll say is we were greatly served by modern digital, the ability to communicate in these days, you know, because there was a lot of WhatsApping, very informal type communications, and then there was more formal emails, some phone calls. So I think that really helped. It was almost as if we were in the same room with a pile of paper.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I wasn't sure that it's something folks would like to disclose or talk about, you know, but we appreciate that. Thank you. So now I'll have Simone Leid come to the podium. She will be presenting an excerpt, well, no, her entire poem, actually. And listen carefully to this. Mother Earth say, put the highway between she legs. Between your legs, sorry. And for all the Trinidadians in the room, we know that reference, right? I don't know if Simone wants to provide some context. You're very free to.
If you're Trinidadian, you know the context. But it's really dealing with a part of the country, the Bay Penal area that is very flood prone, and thinking of how particularly the older people in that area, the older women, feel about what is happening in their community. So Mother Earth say, put the highway between your legs. Mother sitting in her hammock, pipe in her mouth. All around her, the lagoon swells like black poison in Shiva's throat. The tomato, baigan, shadow bene cover over. 2 lengths away,
A cowhead is all you can see, straining above the water, eyes wild with terror. The rescuers coming through in the dinghy plead, "Mother, you have to come. You're going to drown here." Mother take a long drag, the gray smoke blaring through her nostrils. She resets the awning round her head. "Aye, all right. Just leave a little food and water for me." The water begins to seep through the canvas. She gathers the hem of her dress onto her lap. "It did always flood here in Woodland, but since they cut the channel and built road, it get more worse. Was a time you could have put your hand in the dirt and pull yourself out. Rice in the wet season, pumpkin and bhaji in the dry. When the sea start to seep in the land, we try little cattle, chicken and thing. But the big Sawati and them backfill the land, drown out all we prosperity. When I was small, here had nothing but mangrove and the wet earth. Life was hard, but we put up with Jandy and bring the motherland right here. We bracelets passed down from Madras to buy little wood and galvanize to make we place a home. Now the men pick up and gone. It's only we women stay. Is we sweat what nourish the soil? Is we tears water the land? Where there was nothing, we make our life." A jumbie bird screeches, the devil's throaty cackle echoing across the lagoon. Galvanized roofs stilled, like cane mice holding their breaths. Mother looks out beyond the veranda, her gray eyes traveling with the ancestors. Then mother voice, thick and acrid, like bagasse and bayrum, pierces the darkening. "My body already weak. The life done start to come out. If I had to dead, let me dead right here. It's here I born and grow and fix my place for my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Simple as you see me here."
Thank you so much, Simone. Simone is also a cropperite, as is Shivanee. I don't know if we mentioned that previously, yes? All right, so it's an honor to have Simone contribute to this anthology. Shivanee, we come back to you. So you are also involved as part of the editorial team of the recently published Unstitching Silence anthology, which addresses domestic violence. I am curious about your thoughts on how these kinds of initiatives can really rally public interest, opinion, and shape, to some degree, policy where necessary, or behavior. How do you see the potential for this kind of initiative?
Unstitching Silence, which assembles 10 poems and fiction pieces on gender-based violence across the Caribbean, was also published by Peekash Press and launched at our home, the home of the Peekash Lit Fest, the Writers' Center, earlier this year. I had the honor of being the co-editor alongside Lucy Evans on that work, editing that particular anthology for reasons you can, I'm sure, imagine, and don't have to imagine because they're very real, was challenging in different ways, often a very emotional and fraught process. But it was necessary work, and I was honored to do it. Jared Hosein also has a piece in that anthology. These are necessary books, and this is necessary work. I feel extraordinarily humble and grateful to be in a position of trust, real trust, that a call for submissions can open, that my name can be attached to it, and that this engenders trust rather than suspicion. The more that these stories are told and shared, and the more that all of us Caribbean writers see our own voices in prints, published, and I can't emphasize this part enough, by our own presses in our own countries, that is extraordinary work. However, we can all be in the process of doing this, and through the generosity of often largely external funders, which is a whole other conversation, is to our benefit. And, they're written by us and for us, in a time when, if you will have tuned in to our Big Ideas conversation yesterday, in a time when the concept of home and what it means to be a homegrown anything is now, I think, more important than ever, I can only welcome more and more anthologies of this kind.
Thank you, Shivanee. Diana, do you have any thoughts on that and the potential for this kind of intervention, you know, particularly in the environmental space that you inhabit?
Well, like I say, we need to reach for people's hearts, and the narratives are the best way to do that. Stories, poetry, creative nonfiction, performance, music, the arts generally. It's not, you know, after all these years, we've known about the climate crisis, and knowing about it has not generated the kind of change that we need. So we need our stories. I would like to see this book and every other book like it, the ones written by us, for us, in the hands of every single parliamentarian, government leader, private sector leader in the entire Caribbean. Let them not be able to ignore our voices, which, you know, they're often not at scientific conferences. Let's send it to your very beautiful building over there.
We could put our hands together for that.
I'm sure there are some pigeonholes over there, and just put them in there. Maybe they'll flip through them and one story will grab their eyes.
Yeah, and this is why it's so important for us to get the book sold, because that is how we intend to fund future prints, so that we can really get it across the region where it belongs. So we invite now Randy Ablack, our next reader. He is going to read for us an excerpt from his fiction piece, The Rightful Owner.
They had curry iguana and fry break for breakfast that day. As the sea was so rough, Bengoche told them of an alternate trail to take, one higher up the river, one only the locals used. He exposed at length about which bays were most beautiful and at what times. Stevie laughed it all up. It was fodder for future excursions. Stay far in the rainy season. That river does come down sudden. Strangers just come up here and don't ask the people about nothing. Look, we had was to rescue some hikers last year. He warned them to respect the Earth People, a tribe of anti-establishment bushmen that roamed the forest naked, living off the land, washing themselves in the rivers. And we mustn't pelt stones at them, Samuel? He said to one of the boys. Them is not elephants. The boys called Samuel reddened, pretending to stoke coals in the earthen chula. He introduced both Jacob and Samuel as sons, but only Jacob returned with him to the family home in Port of Spain. Samuel's mother was a housekeeper on the estate where he worked. I showed him how this place could make good money, Bengoche interrupted himself, complaining about his landlord. With the copra, with the coconut, but they say that this country have too many invisible structures keeping agriculture as down. Invisible structures, prompted Stevie. You mean like evil spirit? Not spirit. Bush spirit is a good spirit, said Bengoche. Well, out here is the damn place self for rich man to mine buck. Stevie's eyes searched the surrounding forest. Bengoche shook his head. Pretty larceny, guessed Jabon. Out here, yes, we just have larceny. We have illegal logging, quarrying. If you only stand up here long enough, they thief you and all. But when we say invisible structures, we mean like a petty politics. Bengoche's fingers pulled at invisible strings. Politics? Stevie looked around, his thoughts far. This would be the last place to think about politics. Yeah, you're trying with the copra. You have copra to move, but you're steady bouncing your head against the Ministry of Agriculture, against the EMA, against Forestry Division, Bureau of Standards, Customs, Coast Guard. You're up against something you just can't see. An invisible structure, Javon smiled, like your landlord Lyman with the opposition or what? Bengoche stroked his imaginary beard. It's easier to import food and give a man a kickback than to put on a proper infrastructure. It's the oil money that spoil me. Nobody really have skin in the game no more, you know? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Randy, for that. And, well, Diana, you, in a social media post recently, because I have been paying attention, in promoting the anthology, you talked about, and you said it earlier, you always wanted to do something like this, put together something that spoke to these issues. Has this project sated that desire for you?
Absolutely not. There is so much more to say that, yeah, I mean, this anthology has a climate focus, although in another way it doesn't, because if you think of climate as this sort of external thing, then you miss the whole point of it, right? So these are stories, poems, essays about our land, the abundance of our land, and the threats to our way of life, to our land, to our home. And I think there's much more to say on those subjects. You talk about the highway going between the legs of the woman, the way we're developing, the energy transition that needs to be made. You don't want me on my soapbox at all, but there is much more to say.
So you have any ideas around what form that might take?
Well, I'm a writer, so I gravitate to the written word, but I know that we Caribbean people are people of the body. We're people of performance. We're visual people. We are musical people. So I would like to see a project that brought in all of those elements. And I'll say one thing about, I often got asked in my environmental lives, maybe from the audience like you, what can I do, right? And it was a hard question, especially when the subject is something like climate. And I have come to feel that it's not so much about all of us ordinary people trying to change these issues because they are so large and they are so long-term. It is about reaching our leaders. So if I had my druthers, I would have a project aimed at the people who sit in governments. We leave them out, We educate school children. We put up posters, we have beach cleanups. We leave out the people sitting in that building over there, and it is those people who make the decisions about the highway that shouldn't go where it's going, or the hotel, or the energy transition. That's what I would do if I had the energy.
Thank you for that. And Shivanee touched on the issue of funding earlier, and we are very grateful to Open Society Foundations for engaging with us over 3 years to produce 4 different types of projects. This is just the second of them. And there's so much merit to what you're saying, coming up with something that targets a very different group of people is definitely something we may need to start thinking of. And I don't think George Soros would mind too much.
No. Who has done it? No one has done it. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, and now we welcome our final reader this afternoon. Brendon Alekseii will take us out with his creative nonfiction, his excerpt from Us Polluted in Turn. Let's welcome him.
Can there be a time now where simply changing one's relationship with the world can make us better people? I want to say yes. After all, it's only practical. It's hard to justify a fist fight in a thunderstorm. But even that only matters if there's enough wood to shut the windows, enough sandbags for the flooding, a can of food for each to eat from. For those whose entire world has hardened them, there's no reason to work to change it. The world is hot for me too, they think, and no one stopped to give me anything because of it. Here's a kind of catch-22. To soften those hearts, one must give them a nurturing environment, But in order to create such an environment, we need everyone, including them, to get over themselves and make it. To be clear, I'm not all that convinced that dozens of poor farmers who once brutalized their wives suddenly became saints upon access to clean water for their crops. Similarly, my grandfather, not hydrocarbons or microplastics, was responsible for the things my family experienced. But it's also undeniable that the world we wake up to shapes how we feel we can move through it. For me, even though I rebuke my grandfather's tendencies, I've picked up others just as pessimistic and dangerous. Growing up, seeing world leaders ignore the very real signs of a dangerously warming earth as the ramblings of career activists makes me feel like we're already doomed. And when you believe that, it's hard to care. Not just about putting the plastic bottle in the bin, but about crime, good governance, or even my own health. Even after over a decade of working in advocacy and getting to be in rooms with people telling me how they changed the world, I have little except hopelessness, and I hold it close like it's the only thing that's real. I'm married now to a person I love dearly, but cannot stop myself from bringing my hopelessness home to share with her. One day, if our luck betrays us, we might have children and be forced to bring them up in a world where it's too hot to play outside or floodwaters steal their toys. In that way, am I not my grandfather? That's the saddest thought I've ever had. I want to let that hopelessness go. I want to take it from my grandfather. I want to take it from the people living in sea lots and the beatum and foreign rural farmers and everyone. I want to wash away the sludge that sticks to them and pour cool water onto their roots so they might bear good fruit. But as the earth dries up, there's hardly even water for tears.
I mean, maybe not the most uplifting note to end on, but certainly moving and leaving us with a lot to think of, Brendon. Randy, Simone, Dreylan, Kevin, Elton. Congratulations to you all. Of course, these are just 6 of the 18 writers from 8 Caribbean territories represented here today. You will learn a lot more about the others. Please buy the book and find out more. We do have the ebook coming up next week. It will be available via Amazon, so look out for that also. I want to take the opportunity to thank our very special editorial team. It's been such a pleasure, to realize a project of this kind within a year. Cherise mentioned earlier, we launched the call for submissions on the 7th of May last year, and here we are on the 3rd launching the book. And that has a lot to do, I think it's a testament to your own perseverance and dedication to this project. Thank you so very much. I know we had several setbacks and you all rallied. Peekash Press, we can't thank them enough as well for helping us get the publication. You see how beautiful this book is? Yeah, and I have to mention the artist. He's a very young man. He's still a teenager in school. His name is Jaden Bain. He produced the artwork for us. It's paint. He painted this and we digitized it. And we have been using it a lot. So please go out and support the work. And I also need to mention one more person before I leave, and that's Omar Mohammed. I know Cherise highlighted him before, but Omar has really been an enabler in many ways at Cropper. He's no longer the CEO, he's still a director, however. But for this project, I think he saw a co-conspirator in me. But the thing about Omar is that he really does sort of just light the fire and say, okay, go burn stuff. Just don't burn it down to the ground, but, just set the place afire, set it ablaze positively. And so he provided a lot of the energy for this project, and he also wrote the afterword for it. So I do encourage you to have a read of that also. Of course, to Simon Steele, who provided the foreword for the anthology, Merle Hodge, Dr. Merle Hodge, who left us, who provided the dedication to our beloved Funcho Ayagina, who we miss dearly. We're sorry he couldn't be here for this. And of course, to Open Society Foundations, we're very grateful that we could be here today, to the Peekash Lit Fest. I know Sharice mentioned all this already, but it's important for us to give thanks as much as we can. And thank you all for being here.
Just hold that thought. Can we have one last round of applause? Without the unwavering tenacity, stick-to-itiveness, and dedication of Ardeen Sergiu, this book would not have been realized. Please applaud her. Thank you.
I have a last word. Oh, okay. I have a last word too. Taken from one of the stories, Sharma Taylor's Or. A fisherman, Linford, says nobody don't need to tell him about climate change. He says, I is living it. We is living it. It's not nothing in the future. It's here right now.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon, everyone.